Hello, and in this video I'm going to be building a Warbases stable block. This is actually advertised as a Roman stable block, but I'm going to be using it for a Second World War Italian semi-project that I'm currently building on at the moment with some late war British infantry. This is kind of my current interest for wargaming. This is a 15mm scale one, because obviously my figures are 15mm. An MDF pack. It was pretty cheap, I think it was about £5 or something. Very quick delivery from Warbases. I've already had a look at the pieces and it's quite a nice little set, a little model here. But however, I have also bought some extra after sale stuff, and this is some pan tiles from Will's Kits. These are plastic pan tiles. These I'm going to use on the roof of the stable block because the MDF is quite flat, even though it does have laser cut pan tiles on it. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a few tricks on this just to make it look okay. And for me, it's a bit of an experiment to see if I can buy any more of these Warbases things and build them into Italian style Mediterranean buildings. So let's crack on with it and see how we get on.
So the first thing I do is I lay it all out and just do a dry fit. I do this with most models that I have, just to see where all the pieces are, ensure that they're all there, and also just ensure that I know how it goes together as well. There are instructions online for this. You don't get them with the pack itself, but you can get them, download them offline. So this is just a standard thing, really, just to, like I say, familiarise myself with all the pieces of the model. And then it's a case of just basically using PVA glue to put the thing together as well. So I will construct it in little sections, make sure all the pieces are fitting. They already do any from the dry fitting, and just use the PVA glue with a brush just to wipe it on the areas that are going to connect to each other. Obviously, PVA glue being a wood glue means that the MDF works very well when it's works very well for gluing the MDF together. Just ensure that you've got your basic box of the building all put there together, and then just work your way through each and every part of it. The next thing was just to put the roof together. Although I'm using the pan tiles, I'm actually using the roof anyway to hold those in place, because it's a nice fit and it's going to be a lot easier than me making something from scratch. So I just figured I'll use the MDF roof that comes with the model, but just to add to it to give it a little bit extra. And that's fitted together nice and easily. Dead simple little job. I put elastic bands around the building itself just to hold it in place while it dried, so that nothing would spring out, and left it really. PVA doesn't take very long to dry, but I left it overnight just to be sure. The next thing then was to tackle that roof, and as I say, these are the pan tiles from Will's Kits, Will's models. They come in these sized sections. This one's slightly bent, so I was just bending it back in shape. But using a pencil and the actual original building's roof, I measured against the size that I needed, and just had a little tiny bit of overhang on the tiles themselves, so I wouldn't be cutting halfway through them. Mark that out on the actual tile sets themselves with just with a pencil, and then I just started to cut them through. And as I say, these are plastic, so they didn't take very long. Using a knife, not that you really needed it because you could just cut down the line of the tiles anyway. Just using the knife, just cutting through, being careful. You're supposed to cut away from yourself, but just watch those sharp edges, kids. And then when you're through enough, you can actually just snap the plastic off. So that's easy, and then just clean that up with the edge of the knife. And also there were some little nubs and things here and there on the pan tiles themselves, so I cleaned all those up and made sure that they were off. The next thing to do was the ridge tiles. Now this just fits in the little line at the top where the two bits don't meet, and what I wanted to do was this is just a piece of doweling. What I wanted to do was just show that this was also made up of tiles as well. So I just took a knife and gently rolled the actual ridge itself under the blade of the knife to make it look as though there were pan tiles on there as well. It's just a scoring mark all the way around, just to give it a little bit of depth. It's only a tiny detail, but because it's right on the top of the roof, it's worthwhile doing. It only took a couple of minutes. And then you can see, you could probably just make some of those out there, the lines. I then PVA'd that piece into place on where it's supposed to go, on the top of the roof, so you can see that it's got this little ridge all the way across, the little ridge tiles, and you can also see, as I say, the lines that I scored in. And then using super glue, I basically put the pan tiles in their place, exactly where they were supposed to be. There was a tiny bit of overhang, I just wanted that just to cover. You can see that the original roof obviously still is still a line underneath, and that is noticeable on the model, so I painted that in a brown colour to make it look like a roof beam or something that's just showing through, but you'll see that later on. But I did make a note of that. You can see there where the original roof is, just below the pan tile roof, and as I say, I just had to deal with that. I also wanted to make a base for the building as well, just to give it a bit of footprint, and also because buildings aren't built directly onto the ground. So I cut out some basic plasticard, very simple basic stuff, and just nipped those corners off as well with a knife. I didn't measure this, I just cut them off. The reason for this is because I wanted to round it off a little bit, so got a sharp edge on those corners. I then got my file and just rounded those off completely. And then the next thing to do with the base was to add a piece of embossed plasticard to it. This is a kind of a stony embossing on it. It's about 15mm in scale thereabouts. You can pick these up off eBay or Amazon. Use some polystyrene cement, smeared all over that, and then just glued it in place. And then just trimmed down the plasticard that I glued on once it was dry with a knife, just right down to the very size of the base underneath. And again, just clipped off all the edges, cleaned it all up, ensured that all the edges were off and clean, and then that was basically the base completed, apart from its painting. And just to check again that it fits, that the building fits on there, you can see it's just got about a centimetre or so all the way around the building. The next thing to do was to do the plastering, and this is the idea that I got from CP Tabletop and their video on their Pantile Village. It's basically a mix of polyfiller or wood filler, whatever you've got, kind of watered down a bit with some water to whatever consistency you want, and then just stippled on with a brush like this. Very, very simple, very easy. And what you can do on those edges is just go over where the MDF bits actually meet each other. So just ensure that bit is slightly thicker than you would do the rest of it, just so you can absolutely cover up any of those little bits, and it looks like a continual wall that's been plastered. On the front, just be a little bit careful. As I say, I went over with a crappy old brush. This is why I don't throw brushes away. And then just went back over it as well afterwards, just to get some of the patterns out, because you can start to see patterns sometimes in this where you're using the same instrument. You could do this with sponge, but obviously a brush is much bigger and a little bit faster, I would expect. And then you just clean off all the excess that you've got on the edges and things. Dead simple. I then, whilst that was drying, I mean, that took about 24 hours to dry, so as that was drying, I then moved on to painting the base itself. Very simple, painted this in stone grey, just daubed it on, got it on there as quick as possible using a big brush. Nice big strokes, nice and easy, and you can see the pattern on the embossed plasticard there. And then just for a bit of interest, I went back and painted in some of the individual stones in just different colours. I did 2 different colours. I can't remember exactly what they were, but they were kind of stony and tan different colours, and just picked out various bits and pieces, just to, as I say, to add a little bit of interest, so it's not a flat grey stone floor, because obviously stones are different colours. And this will all be merged together in a second when I come to do the wash, using the Seraphim Sepia by Games Workshop. So this was dead simple, just literally paint this on straight out of the bottle until you got good coverage. And I've not shown it in this video, but I went and dry brushed stone grey over the top of the base, just to bring out some of those edges. And then when the plaster had dried, I gave the entire model a undercoat in grey primer just to bring it all together, and then started the actual painting. And I used this yellowish tan colour for the base colour for the plaster. Covered the entire building block in this, using again quite a big brush, just stippling it on. I didn't mind so much if any of the grey showed through, so this is why I'm doing it quite rough and quite quick, because the grey will then also add a little bit of tonal definition to the building. You're not going to just get a flat colour. And you can see as well that the plaster has dried quite lumpy. You can see where it's coming through a little bit, just so it looks quite rough, and that Adobe style of plastering that you get in the Mediterranean and those kind of areas. This is something you don't have to do, but I like to do it, and I just painted the interior. I painted this in beige brown by Vallejo. This is my favourite brown for wood. I will wash this as well at some point, but this was just a basic brown colour just to give it a different interesting colour when you actually open it during a game. You don't have to do this, you could just leave it or even paint it black or whatever, but I'm a bit of a completist sometimes when it comes to these things. You could even go mad and do lots and lots of detail, but I stopped at this point just because I wanted it, you know, in a basic stable brown like this. So it took a little while this, because there's quite a few rooms in there, and I painted every single one of the walls and the backs of the doors and everything. And then that was the basic painting job. It was quite easily, quite quickly done. And just leave that to dry, and it doesn't take overnight because this is acrylic paint, so it was quite quick. While I was painting that, I also used the beige brown on the loft floor. This is a part that sits just above the rest of the barn, and it gives you a second floor of the barn. So again, just another quick paint job using an old, I think it's an old dry brush, but I just ensured the entire thing was covered. And I also painted the doors as well in the same beige brown. You could paint those in a greyish brown because, you know, wood goes greyish when it's old. And then use the hairdryer to speed up the whole process, because I wanted to get this done as quick as possible in a day. And then it was back to washing the entire thing as well, again back in the Seraphim Sepia. This is quite a yellowish brown against workshop wash. It's quite nice, it goes on quite nice and well, and it just brings out a bit of a yellowy colour, which is kind of what I really wanted for the plaster work anyway. And it also adds to the yellowish of the undercoat that I've got. So this would then run into all the tiny bits and nooks and crevices of the plasterwork. And I also did the interior. Again, you really don't have to do this, but I just did it just to give it a little bit of depth. You could just leave it as it is. I'd really, it was just a little bit of an extra job, but it didn't take very long, and I just thought it just makes it look better. I did the stable roof floor. That was done again in Seraphim Sepia, and that will run into all the cracks and all the lines of the floor there. Then once all that was dry, I'd give it a really good dry brushing of Iraqi sand. To dry brush, you basically load up your paintbrush, wipe off as much as you can, and then do what I'm doing here, brush it over the edge of the model. And this starts to really pick out all those little lumps and bumps that you've put on with the plaster. So this is what this is all about. You can really see there, the more paint you have on the brush, the lighter it gets, and this is what I was going for. Be very careful, because you can put more on, but you can't take it off. So when you are dry brushing in the first instance, make sure you've got enough on, as only a small amount on your brush, and then build it up, because you can always add to it rather than taking it away. And this is just a case of going all the way around, and I then used a lighter colour as well, which was the Stone Grey by Vallejo, and this was my final dry brush on this. And again, this one I can give it quite a relatively heavy dry brush. So at this point, the building has actually got 4 different colours on it. It's got your base colour, it's got the wash from the sepia, and then the 2 dry brushes. entirely up to you how many dry brushes you do, how many washes you do, or any of these things. This was enough for me because this is all I needed for this building. I wanted a what looked like a relatively old plastered building that had been in the sun for a while. I then got the Agrax Earthshade out and washed the doors. So you can see there where I'd actually dry brushed a little bit too much on one of the doors. I probably should have repainted that, but I didn't bother. I just washed them. And then it was on to making the tide marks, and I did these with weathering powders. This is from a company called Revel. I just got some of these. This is quite a dark brown one, and I just went around the edge of the bottom with the weathering powder. You literally dip it in dry and let it go on like that, stipple it on. And then I took a lighter greener colour and blended out that brown so it wasn't as obvious, but it was still there. But again, you're getting that two-tone colour. And this is what happens when you see buildings after rain. The splashback comes up, and sometimes it doesn't get cleaned off, especially off a working building like this. So this is just a nice little addition, really, just to give you again a tiny bit of depth. And that's how it looked basically at the end of that. All that work. The next thing to do was to fix it. I varnished it first of all to bring it all together, then also fixed it to its base, and then I added some foliage. If you look at villages in the Mediterranean, they're generally covered in leaves and vines and things. I wasn't too sure if I was overdoing it, but I checked some pictures, and yeah, villages in Italy are absolutely covered in vines and greenery. I also added a few grass tufts and stuff here and there for weeds and things that grow up in the cracks that people don't always see or deal with. And then I moved on to the roof itself. So I was using this stuff. This is a quick dry primer. It's a red primer, red oxide. Again, I got this from the CP Tabletop video. I bought exactly what they'd done because it's a very nice paint. Literally paint the entire roof in this in red, just so you've got a full coverage. Make sure you get on the edges as well and also underneath it, because those pan tiles are just slightly sticking over. We can always repaint all this later on. And then I painted blotches of black, spray painted blotches of black across it, just to give it some tonal variation. You can do as much or as little of this as you want. It really comes out nice. You take the red primer after you've painted these stripes and lines and things from the black. Once that's dry, take the red primer and then just give it again another light misting over the top. And it really brings out a tonal variation in the tiles themselves, which you're going to get anyway. You could paint individual tiles, but this is a much quicker and nicer way of just adding a little bit of depth and a little bit of tonal variation there. Very simple. This was what I picked up from the CP Tabletop video. The next thing was then to weather the roof. This I started with the Agrax Earthshade, just taking some dabs of it and basically wiping it down some of the tiles in various spots, just where rain would fall down or you would just get muck falling down from various bits and pieces. Did that on both sides. Again, you're just really adding that little bit of variation and tonality and interest to the roof, because the roof is the thing that people are going to spot straight away because it's on top, obviously. So again, do what you want with weathering. Make it as messy or as clean as you like. This is a Flory clay wash. This is the grime. I give this a really good wash over the top of the Agrax once this is all dried, and across the entire roof itself. You can see it's quite a greeny kind of colour, and that just looks like rain and grime that's fallen down. Varnish the roof with spray varnish, and then I added some foliage again, where you would get things growing up on the roof itself. So these are kind of vines. I kind of mirrored these to the ones that were growing up already on the rest of the building itself. And you can see there I've also gone back and I'd painted the edges of the roof as well with the beige brown, just to make it look like there was a beam or something. And then I finally added a couple of grass tufts as well here and there, where you would find weeds growing up on the roof in the tops, in between cracks and things. And that was it. It was completed. A relatively easy job. Took me a couple of days. from beginning to end, and that was largely because I was waiting for the red paint. This will be a very nice little building that I'll be able to use in Italy, either for World War II or potentially for infamy for the actual Roman period that it was intended as well. So it's got a couple of uses for me, and it's a very nice little building. Really nice, really cheap, and great service as well from Warbases. Definitely, if you're thinking about it, please pick one up. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I enjoyed the build, I enjoyed making it. If you have enjoyed it, please subscribe if you haven't already, and give me a like and a comment. Thanks for watching.